it's interesting because I do this work for myself, but then I also talk about this with my clients. A lot of people will say things like, just refill your own cup, do self care. But it doesn't always work that way if your cup is a colander and has a bunch of holes in it. So it doesn't matter how much you try to pour back into yourself if it's coming out of all of the holes. You
Mm,
really have to do the work on yourself to shore up where those holes might exist for yourself so that when you do have those opportunities to refill your own cup and pour back into yourself, it actually stays rather than it just
mm.
immediately seeping out like a colander.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets Podcast. I'm Kevin, and today we are joined by Lauren Kaplan. She is the CEO and founder of Growth Ops, been in existence for 7+ years. Welcome to the podcast, Lauren.
Thanks, Kevin. Great to be here.
One thing I'm very, very curious about is your origin story, the lore. Let's start at the very, very beginning. Like, how did you become a coach, and how did it turn into this business that you have now?
Yeah. So the origin story is that it's a fun one. It's kind of the phoenix rising from the ashes, if you will. I was a COO of a startup and I'd been there for a couple of years. And there was a lot of friction with me and the CEO and the other founder with, views and vision on the business and these other various pieces. And they made the decision to part ways. So I was fired. And from there, had to collect myself and kind of lick my wounds and find my next path forward. But that experience of working at that company, working with them, and it was a services business. So working with a lot of other startups and companies as well, started to formulate a lot of my basis and understanding of what drives people and how do you motivate them and how do you get the most out of them. I look back at that and I made plenty of mistakes along the way, but mistakes are your best teachers. And it taught me a lot about human psychology. It taught me a lot about not just individuals and how they operate, but how do they operate in a team context with other humans around them? And how do you bring all those people together to be successful as an individual and as a group? And so when I started Growth Ops, the original business was fractional COO. And what I kept getting brought into was for solving people problems. And what I came to this conclusion of is that all of your business problems are really people problems because people are the ones working in your business. And so the business, while there was plenty of execution and support work in the beginning, over time, our services grew and expanded to include just individual coaching as well, and executive coaching, executive leadership, and even managerial upskilling that includes a lot of personal one on one coaching. Because what I have really found in the hundreds and hundreds of executive level interactions that I've had, not just in growing Growth Ops and along the way here, but even before that, is humans, we as people, we are born this blank slate, this beautiful blank slate, and we are filled up with all of the experiences that we have over time that come to inform how we show up as adults. But a lot of times when you're a strong learner, you've picked up habits and fears that have become your limiting beliefs, and they don't serve you once you're a full-fledged adult in the world. They kept you safe as a kid and a teenager, but now here you are in the larger world, and those things are really holding you back. And I just saw that pattern time and time and time again. And with a lot of strong pattern recognition, started to see a lot of the little seeds of those kind of things in people very quickly and early on, which led to a lot of very natural coaching relationships with my clients. And eventually we formulated the coaching portion of the business as well.
You said something very profound, like most of the problems are people problems. And then you kind of went into, we start as a blank slate, and then things that we go through these experiences and then they affect our adult life. What's a common pattern that you've kind of noticed kind of turns into these people problems for
Yeah.
businesses?
Well, there are two that I see most commonly, and there's plenty more than
Mhm.
this. but these are the two that I see most common. The first is perfectionism. So a belief that unless it's perfect, it's not enough. But what is really happening in your subconscious is it's not enough, it's you as a person are not enough. And so people equate perfectionism with being personally enough. And they derive much of their satisfaction and their happiness and their joy from, is it perfect? Therefore, I am accepted and loved. And the challenge is that
Mm,
there's no real definition of perfection. Your definition may be different than someone else. And even if you get plenty of input to give you the vision of what perfection could look like, that's pretty unlikely to be achieved or sustained. So even if you hit perfection in a moment, circumstances, entropy, laws of physics, everything changes. So you're not going to be able to sustain and maintain that. And while that is initially a very strong motivator for high performing people, it is not a sustainable one over time. And eventually, most people hit a really hard wall that they can't just bash their head against and punch through, and they'll collapse if they continue operating under this guise of perfection equals being loved, equals being worthy, equals being enough. And
mm,
the second that I see, and this tends to be coupled with perfectionism, is setting boundaries. People are very uncomfortable setting boundaries if they were brought up and conditioned to be a people pleaser. I particularly see this with people in operational roles and really strong problem solvers. They have a tendency to say yes to taking on every problem. And while that propelled them forward initially, eventually they reach a very similar place as a perfectionist where there is no capacity left to take on anything else. And if you love solving problems, but you now have 100 plates spinning in the air of problems that you're working on, solving, maintaining, where's the 101's going to go? It's going to come crashing down.
mhm,
And so these patterns, they're very difficult to see when you're in the thick of it, but eventually most people they do hit a wall, whether it's emotional or it's health wise and manifest physically. It happens, and
mhm,
dismantling these patterns that you built your life on, while incredibly difficult, are some of the most rewarding work you will ever do, because you know you're healing when you're choosing peace over performance. And peace allows you to bring all of your talent and your skills and your knowledge and your abilities to the true forefront, not white knuckling your way through it.
When people do this work, this inner work, right? What have you kind of noticed changed externally?
Well, there's a lot of resistance initially because they haven't, wanted to face a lot of these things early on or at all. And sometimes when they're seeing that, or that's being reflected back to them, they don't want to deal with it. They want to hide. But when
Mm,
people are ready to embrace that, and a lot of people will use the term, get through it. You have to move through it to get past it. I have a different view on it. I think you have to embrace it and reintegrate it to really become whole. The way I visualize these things is almost like you have these pieces of yourself that have been fractured and broken off of you, and you need to bring them back together. There's this Japanese practice of repairing a broken, flower pot or a teacup with beautiful gold, and then you get to see the veins of gold that line the piece as you fix it. And they see this incredible beauty in putting those pieces back together with new element. They don't see it as it's broken and now it needs to be thrown away. They see beauty in the next version of it. And that's my vision for a lot of people, is that they need to reintegrate these things and see it as a new version, a new beautiful version of themselves. And I think that is what unlocks the incredible potential for people. And when they do this work and they start to embrace those things, I just noticed the level of peace that they didn't have before, where before they were riddled with anxiety, or they were hiding it pretty well. I could see it, but most others couldn't. Most other people would just say, wow, you're such a badass, or, you're a boss bitch, or all the terms that people use these days to describe somebody who, quite frankly, in my opinion, is not on the edge of burnout, is living in burnout, but is doing a good job of hiding it and making it look like they're keeping it all together. And when they're going through this work, there's a lot of ups and downs. There are days when it feels too heavy. And I tell people that sometimes you need to match your day to your energy. If you keep trying to white knuckle your way through it, then you're just staying where you were. But matching your day to your energy, if you have the luxury of doing this, not everyone does. People have a lot of responsibilities in their life that keep them from having space for themselves. But when you do that,
Mm,
you show up in an entirely refreshed way the next hour, the next day, the next week at a level you haven't been operating at before.
mm,
And so it ebbs and flows. I mean, you'll have these days where you're like, wow, I finally feel like the full version of myself, the truly integrated, powerful, talented, loved human that I always have been and has been under the surface. And then you'll have days where you are reminded of the triggers that have kept you stuck and you make mistakes and you repeat old habits and then you catch yourself and you grow and you change and you move on. And that's what I often see. It is not a linear path. That's one of the things that you hear the most. It's not instant. You may make big leaps when you have certain aha moments or you gain a perspective you haven't had before, but you are still going to have days when you're a little behind where you thought you
mm.
were or where you wanted to be. And those days are opportunities to take stock and understand what's working and what's, yeah.
Want to ask you something. How do people like come find you, right? So, like, who are the people kind of finding out about like your work and stuff?
The majority of our work is through referrals and
Mm,
what I call trusted relationships, where we have a relationship with a variety of people and through the work that they do with us or with me or with my business partner in coaching, they come across other people and they say, oh, you got to meet Lauren or you got to meet Carissa. And we never show up with the intention of selling someone.
mhm,
We show up with the intention of, learning about who the person is and what they care about and what they're trying to work on or what problem they're solving. And I
mm,
think the authenticity of being excited to help people, which I am, I love when people bring me interesting problems. I'll sit there all day with you before we even talk any kind of business. But I think that that's why we get as many referrals as we do through our trusted relationships and networks because showing up with authenticity and generosity establishes a relationship very quickly. And
mm,
so much of your success as a coach and as a coachee is your comfort level with the person you're working with. You can't
mm,
hide parts of yourself. You can't perform in your work with your coach. You need to be real, raw, and honest. If you are holding back or you are putting on a show or you're keeping the mask up, you're not doing the work that's really going to transform you or help you ultimately achieve sustainable goals. People are real with us and they get real very quickly. Carissa has a joke that if we go out to any event, I'll have like 5 new clients in an hour because I'm just so excited about meeting new people and getting to know them and hearing what their story is and what their challenges are and ideating with them on how they can conquer that. So it is mostly referrals through our trusted networks, but being out and about in the world, I think that every person you meet is some kind of opportunity. I don't automatically label them as any one, but that's what I found time and again. It's that the world is just full
mm.
of people to connect with.
So that's interesting. You're meeting people, you're having trusted referrals. They're raising their hands, wanting to be like, "Oh, I gotta work with Lauren and Carissa," right? And so, once someone kind of like decides to work with you, what does a coaching engagement kind of look like? Is it mostly one-on-one? It seems like it, since it seems very intimate. But I would love for you to walk me through coaching engagement.
Yeah, coach engagements are one on one and they are very intimate. And it depends on how we start, depends on how the relationship started. So if they
Mm,
were already a consulting client with the growth ops team, then we already know a lot of the dynamics that they're dealing with, and we may already know the person quite well. So
mm,
we may start by going pretty deep on things much faster because they don't have to explain as much context versus someone that we have less organizational context of, the professional setting, we are going to spend a lot more time up front getting to know the players, getting to know the
mm,
landscape that they're operating within because context matters. One of the philosophies that my team and I have is we don't think there's any single best practice. We think that there are frameworks that you can use to design appropriate option. And so that is
mm,
how we approach all of our relationships is getting to know people through a variety of things. It's conversation, it is assessments. We really love Strength Finder. We love Strength Finder. The reason we like this is because it comes from an incredibly positive angle, and it's really informative to understand where you've got strengths, which are going to feel like a 4-lane superhighway, versus where you have weaknesses that's going to feel like hacking your way through a jungle with a butter knife. And a lot of people are often coached to shore up their weaknesses. And we would prefer to instead position people for their strength. The amount of work that it takes to shore up a weakness is 10x what it takes to rely on your strength and position yourself well using your strength. But it's also incredibly emotionally draining to just be hacking away through a jungle with a butter knife. So we like to focus on the positive side of things. Now, it's also important to recognize that you can over leverage your strengths and they can actually become a weakness if you are overusing them. So we also do a lot of coaching around those things. But strengths are really how people show up in a way that is most authentic and natural for them. And that is how they're going to do best in their jobs and connecting with people. So we like to focus on that. And we do spend a lot of time initially going through those reports. People learn a lot from them. And they say, yeah, that really does feel like me. Or we evaluate what might feel different for them. And we go from there. And they wind up sharing a lot of stories, inevitably sharing a lot of stories about how they see those strengths showing up in both their personal and their professional life. And that gives us a lot of starting points and fodder and conversation for how do you feel about those things when you're able to use them? How do you feel when you're not? What of these strengths is keeping you from achieving some of the goals that you have? How do we authentically help you change some of your behaviors while still leveraging who you are and your strength? So it really does give us a lot of opportunity to coach them in ways that feels authentic. There's nothing worse than getting advice that you sit there and say, well, that's not authentic to me. I would never do that. Not only does it feel like a waste of time and conversation, but it feels like you're being pushed to do something that would never make sense for you. So we really try to be thoughtful around what's going to be authentic to the person. And of course, there's goals. What goals does the person have? And maybe those goals aren't being set by them. Maybe coaching is being mandated by their C-suite or their leadership or their board of directors or some other outside group that is requiring this work to be done. That's very different than coaching engagement because if the person isn't bought in and aligned with what potential they have, then it's going to be pretty difficult to see change or get any kind of result.
So, Lauren, like obviously the work you do is very personal, it's very intimate, right? And so, how do you think about managing your capacity? I know pre-podcast you were telling me that you had a team, but I would love to kind of hear how you think about client capacity.
So client capacity is challenging because you only have so many days, excuse me, so many hours in the day and in the week. And also, capacity is not just time, it is also emotional reservoir. And this part is incredibly important that a lot of people don't understand that coaching is what's called hermeneutic labor. It is emotional labor. And you are helping people process a tremendous amount of emotions on a regular basis. And then you yourself have to process your own experience to then be prepared and make space for the next coaching client that you're working with. So while most people who are thinking about starting a coaching business might calculate, well, I have 8 hours in the day and I'll do 50-minute sessions, and that allows me to do 8 sessions a day and XYZ. That's not realistic because you need breaks to process and eliminate certain emotions that you're helping people work through. I think most people that are successful coaches are highly empathic. They're not sympathetic, they're empathetic. And what that means is that they are taking those emotions in and they are doing something with those emotions. Oftentimes, working to support somebody in transmuting those emotions into fuel, motivation, healing, letting go, whatever those things are that are going to help that person use or release. You yourself are also taking some of that on in the process. And so you've got to know your own emotional reservoir capacity just as much as the time that you have in a day. So that's a huge component that I think about. And there's a second piece to this that It's interesting because I do this work for myself, but then I also talk about this with my clients. A lot of people will say things like, just refill your own cup, do self care. But it doesn't always work that way if your cup is a colander and has a bunch of holes in it. So it doesn't matter how much you try to pour back into yourself if it's coming out of all of the holes. You really have to do the work on yourself to shore up where those holes might exist for yourself so that when you do have those opportunities to refill your own cup and pour back into yourself, it actually stays rather than it just
Mm,
immediately seeping out like column. So that's a big part of it. I think successful coaches have done, and are doing the work on themselves to have more capacity and a more emptied emotional reservoir to help contain those emotions to their clients. And then really, really strong toolkits and mechanisms to drain and pour that out very effectively. And a tool that
yeah.
I use daily is journaling. So this is a practice by a physician. She wrote a book called Mind Your Body. It's actually about chronic pain and chronic illness and symptoms. And one of her mechanisms for helping people heal from chronic conditions that no doctor knows how to fix. You can get 100 diagnoses, but everybody says you otherwise seem healthy. I don't know how to help you. Her practice is what she calls journal speak. And the way it works is you journal for 20 minutes. Then you take that piece of paper. It's more effective to write than it is to type. And you burn it or you shred it. So you are literally releasing all of that emotional poison onto that paper, and then you are destroying it, never to be looked at again. It's not meant for you to keep coming back to. It's meant for you to release. But you have to
Mm,
cap this process with 10 to 15 minutes of meditation because you need to give your body and your nervous system an opportunity to then reset and to process out all the cortisol that gets ultimately triggered by these emotional experiences and these emotional
yeah.
tires, if you will, that exist everywhere in today's world. And so interesting about writing by hand. I just learned this. I was like, wow, it's common sense and yet so incredibly sharp and precise. Writing forces your brain to slow down and it removes the irrational edge of your emotion. Speaking and processing verbally is one important way of doing it, but by paper is another really critical mechanism to lose the edge of a lot of those emotions that are truly irrational. And so
Mm,
that's another practice that I do. And I do this every couple of days. I don't do it every day, but I find it incredibly effective. I try to get a lot of my clients to do the same and make time for this practice because it really reduces that emotional reservoir and helps you get to a really good place where you can be at peace. So,
mm,
when you take that now to back to your question of how do you think about capacity, it's not just the hours in the day, it's how much can you emotionally take on with clients. And we are thoughtful about the kind of clients that we take on. We don't say yes to everybody. And we coach our clients not to say yes to everything either. So why would we do that? We've got to walk the talk, we or walk the walk. We can't just say things and not follow them ourselves. It's like going to a doctor who tells you to cut sugar and lose weight and they're like 100 pounds overweight. Why are you
yeah.
going to trust them?
Yeah, that is true. One of the things I want to ask you too is like something I noticed with a lot of coaches is that a lot of coaches struggle with things like pricing and all that. And with the work that you do, because we started off the podcast with like boundaries, perfectionism. Those are more, some people would say call them soft skills, but it's not like a hard ROI compared to like marketing and sales, right? And so when you think about pricing your services, what has helped you like kind of structure your pricing? Obviously, you don't have to give any hard numbers, but I would love to kind of hear like some of what's worked for you over the years.
So for coaching, we do a fixed monthly fee, and
Mm,
our clients get, we have a kickoff, which could be 60 to 90 minutes. It depends on what we're doing. Like I said, it depends on how much organizational context we have of that person. Or if we don't have a lot of that, maybe we do a longer kickoff or the first couple of sessions are longer. Maybe they're 90 minutes. Most people don't have the emotional capacity to do more than that anyway in any given session. But we meet weekly with our clients and they're usually about an hour. The first 20 minutes or so, they're not totally in. It
mm,
actually takes people about 20 to 30 minutes to start to get comfortable in talking through whatever experience or issue or problem they're trying to solve. So that's why you need that full hour, if not more. If I had my way, I would do 75 minutes minimum because I
mm,
think that gives us that ramp up period to then be able to get into some of the deeper topics and continue making progress. And then from there, they're able to reach out at any given time. They don't
I
have to
see.
stick to just the once a week. If they have something come up, we're available for those late night chats or other emergencies, if you will. Very few of our clients ever take advantage of that, but it's available. And
Mm.
what we try to do in the beginning is we try to set some clear goals. What do they want to accomplish? And we take notes as we go. We're taking notes to obviously understand and remember the context of everything they're sharing with us, but also to go back to those notes and look at what their goals are and see if we are making steady progress against those things. And progress doesn't come, like you said, in a measurable KPI the way you can with marketing or revenue or sales. It comes from behavior. It comes from the words the person uses and chooses. It comes from how they reacted to a situation that they would have reacted to differently in the past. When the universe delivers you an opportunity to practice the work you're doing, we lean hard on people. We say to them, hey, this is a good opportunity to try it differently. And when they see that they start to get different results, it's really motivating for people and it keeps them really engaged in the process of continuing to
Mm.
adapt their behavior. So a lot of coaches I know will do a minimum 6-month engagement. We don't. We do a minimum of 3 months because sometimes the client's not the right fit for us either, which we talked about earlier. And I want to see the seriousness of the commitment from the other person, but I don't want them to ever feel like they are locked into something that they can't afford or that they are not really ready for. A lot of salespeople will say things like, you follow up until you get an answer. And I don't do that. I don't feel that you're building the right relationship with someone in a way that is going to get them the results they're looking for or, even fulfill my desires to help people. I want the person to be bought in and ready. I don't want to use sales tactics to get them there. Now, I recognize that that probably means that we lose potential sales we could have had, but I'd rather have really high value, high quality relationships and coaching clients than a bunch that I'm not looking forward to on a weekly basis.
And again, I mean, that's probably one of the reasons why you have so many referrals because of that process versus like the short term, like,
Yep.
getting the sales and stuff like that. So yeah.
I think that the hallmark of a great coach is having other great coaches in your network to refer to. I have a client and one of their board members was looking for coaching. And so he referred me to the board member. And there was something about it that just didn't feel, I don't know how to describe this. It felt a little off to be coaching him and a board member, even though I'd be coaching him on completely separate businesses, not related, but there just felt like this conflict of interest. And
Mm.
I said, you know what? I asked her, are you meeting with other coaches? She said, I've only met with one other. I said, let me refer you to a couple of other people as well. You should meet people and see what the variety is because the feel of the relationship is really critical. And she wound up going with one of those other coaches. And I was thrilled. I think she's going to have a great coaching relationship and outcome with this person. Do I think we could have had good results together too? I do. But that underlying conflict of interest was not comfortable. I didn't want that to be there. And then I have another client that needed coaching for something pretty specific in sales. And while I think that we could have done it, it's not our exact wheelhouse. And I would rather send them to somebody who this is exactly what they do so that they get the best version of their result. Coaching is just as much about getting to work one on one with somebody as it is helping them find the right person to get the results they're looking for.
Yeah, and that's something interesting I notice you do. It's like you're that trusted advisor for your clients and not even your clients, just the people that come to you. It seems like you have that vibe throughout the whole process. Now, I definitely want to be mindful of our time. I know that you have a hard stop fairly soon, but one thing I am very, very curious about is your future goals. So I'm kind of curious, where do you want this coaching business to take you in the next few years? Do you have like desires to scale, hire more people, secret dreams no one knows about? I would love to kind
Yeah.
of hear about that.
Yeah. So the goals over the next few years are to find ways to reach more people in a scalable way. And so my business partner and I are developing these digital assets right now called MVPs by Growth Ops Go. And these are our frameworks of how we approach challenges, issues, work, people, psychology, performance of individuals, is how we approach all of our work. So it will give people the same kind of thoughts, experiments that we would do live one-on-one, and allows them to go through those things on their own on paper if they either can't afford or don't have the time necessarily to engage with a coach. And of course, those things have the opportunity for someone to decide they would want to work with us one-on-one. But it's a wonderful mechanism for people to understand how we work and how we think, and
Mm.
find opportunities for growth along the way when they don't have the time or the resources to do that one-on-one. So that's one way that we see as an opportunity to scalably reach more people. My colleague and I were also writing several books this year or in 2026 on a variety of topics related to organizational performance and individual people psychology. And so another way to reach more people. And over time, the desire is to grow the business and to have a larger team and to be able to hire more people. The larger growth ops gets, the more specialists we can afford to hire. So instead of me sending that, sales coaching referral outside, the bigger we get, the more clients we have. That means there is more sales coaching needed. I get to bring that sales coach in house and now offer that coaching and training to a wide variety of people. That is the goal. And I want to have a full-time therapist. I want to hire full-time as an employee a person who is a psychiatrist and a psychologist, because those different factors, those pieces, they're incredibly important to the foundation of building really healthy resiliency for people. And having those resources available for people on an executive level and for clients, I think is really unique, but much needed, especially given how taxed mental health resources are in the US in particular since COVID. Having someone available to our clients like that, I think it would be on a whole other level. And also, another item that we have been working on is creating some workshops. Again, a one to many approach of being able to get to work with a lot more people in a short period of time. And then, like I said, the ones who have the time and the resources to work with us one on one will get to do that through a variety of these mechanisms.
I love that. Like, one interesting thing, this will be my last question for you. As you're headed toward this vision, what are some challenges that you're kind of noticing like come up right now? Maybe some things that people can't see outside looking in.
Some of the challenges that we've had in particular is, quite frankly, it's been hiring. Much of the early work of this business was HR work, which of course touches on people and performance. But what's been so challenging is that the consulting side of the business delivers a tremendous amount of HR execution work. But it is the business mindset and the business strategy and the psychology pieces that make what we do incredibly unique and valuable. And it
Mhm.
positions us as a business strategy partner, not an HR partner, or not the HR office, which most people think is the principal's office. And so that's one of the challenges is first, it's changing people's perception of those things. But then
Mhm.
second, it's hiring employees who don't perpetuate the ongoing stereotypes of HR people. It's hiring people who understand the human elements behind those things and understand the psychology and the performance pieces and actually understand how the entire business works, not just the HR compliance. So that has been a big challenge for us, though we just recently hired two new people and they are doing really well. And I'm really excited about the potential that we have with them because they seem to be breaking that mold, which is great. But finding people who don't fit that traditional mold, it's been rough. That's been really hard. So we're kind of coming at it from two different angles these days. We're hiring more less experienced people and training them so that we get to start from scratch and infuse those principles in them from day one. And then we're working with really experienced people who don't need the HR side of things because they're already doing the high level strategy and coaching work. So
Mm.
that's how we're bridging that gap. We were trying to find people right in the middle, and we've now come to realize that we can't do that so easily. Those people are these unicorns that are going to be
Mm.
difficult to find and very expensive. So let's
Mm.
instead go bottom and top at the same time, and eventually they come together.
There's so much more I want to touch upon in this podcast, but we ran out of time. With that being said, what's the best way for people to find you and connect with you?
So the best way to connect with me would be on LinkedIn. Send me a message saying that you saw me on this podcast so that I know that you're not just trying to sell me services. On LinkedIn, the messaging is out of control, like just trying to sell people services. But let me know that you heard about us through this podcast, and I will gladly respond. Happy to have conversation if what the work we do can be helpful, and send me a connection request. and follow along with our posts on our journey.
Lauren, I really enjoyed this podcast because it touches upon a lot of things that I'm personally interested in. I'm interested into a lot of the neuroscience, the inner work that you kind of talked about earlier. You dropped some really great gold about people like one, the Japanese art that we talked about, two, how a lot of people they're not on the edge of burnout, they're actually like living with burnout and just hiding it, which honestly I was like, oh shit, that is me right there. And how this isn't always linear, right? Like there's ebbs and flows, and I've kind of experienced that myself. You're also so generous about like, hey, how do you think about capacity and how it's more than just like, oh yeah, the hour spent or anything like that. It's an emotional reservoir because this is a people human business, right? And sometimes the business people they lose track of that sometimes. And I was also really inspired by your future goal as well to have multidisciplinary teams and with the workshops and the courses and the books and all that. It's really, really, really inspiring. So I just want to say it's a long-winded way of saying, hey, I really love the work that you do. The work that you do matters. And thank you for being so generous with all your wisdom and stuff. And I appreciate you coming on this podcast.
Thank you so much for hosting and your thoughtful questions that I think help share a lot of these concepts with people. And I hope that our listeners learn something that they can take into their daily life and help them continue to grow and transform.
Yeah. Thank you, Lauren. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.